I'm Gina Bell, and I'm a storyteller. This is Jars of Arioch, Part 2, Chapter 5, Hope's Murder. I woke up with a jolt and realized I was in my own bed. I instantly began screaming for Hope. Benoit came running into my room. "Tracy, it's okay, honey." Benoit walked in with her soothing voice. "It's not okay, Zydeco." I'd never called her by her first name before. "Unless you know where Hope is and you can take me to her right now. Unless you can do that, nothing is okay." "I know. I've got every cop in the city looking for her right now." "What the hell time is it?" Almost 8. AM or PM? PM. What? How the fuck could you have let me sleep this long? I need you to leave now." "Excuse me? Tracy, I called Raven and she told me Hope is microchipped. We're gonna find her, baby. I need you to leave, Benoit." "Are you blaming me for this?" In that second, I realized I must have sounded horrible. I felt terrible. "Listen to me. I adore you, and no, I'm not blaming you for any of this. But you have no idea how important Hope is for me, what she does for me. She's like my child. She keeps my boss at bay. I don't know what's going to happen with him, but I know I can't have you anywhere near me right now. Benoit, if he doesn't show up, I'm going to ask for his help. I'm going to try and bring him to me. I will do anything to get her back. Anything. Anything but risk your life. If you really want to help me, go find my dog." "Okay, but I need to hear from you in some way every hour, or I will come in here guns blazing." I responded, "Unfortunately, that won't do you no good, you idiot." After finally getting Benoit to leave me alone, I sat and held Hope's things. I tranced over and over, hoping maybe I might be able to tap into Nanny's gift. But nothing happened. I saw occasional flashes of purple, and that was all. I got up to turn on the heater. It was freezing in my apartment since I still hadn't fixed the window. I just didn't have time for life's bullshit right now. I had taped cardboard over the hole. Every once in a while, the wind would blow it off, and I'd have to find a new way, a stronger way to put it back. I could hear the whistle of the wind coming through the apartment and knew I would have to retape it again. I grabbed one of the tape rolls Benoit had bought and walked into the kitchen to try and put the cardboard back in place. The window had black feathers sticking to it, and a few were scattered around in the kitchen. I felt lost and alone. I felt like I did when Travis left. As hard as I couldn't help but think of all the horrible things someone or something might do to my dog. I had no idea how she would even respond to people without me. What if they took her as aggressive and put her down? The images filling my thoughts were horrific. I couldn't stop crying. I put on my hunting clothes and waited for warmth from my fingertips that might lead me to her. But nothing came. I got a look at myself in the mirror and every ounce of weakness left me. The sorrow instantly turned to adrenaline. I needed my fucking dog, and I needed her now. I grabbed one of the mason jars Arioch had given me and wrote on the paper, "Where is Hope?" I thought of her as hard as I could, and I sealed the question into the jar. The moment I twisted the lid, it began to glow. I placed the jar and closed the door, which, as usual, triggered a whoosh just as the door closed. I didn't have time to care about anything other than Hope. I had video surveillance all over my apartment. I went back and watched the footage to see if I could see anything after the cardboard came down. About 10 minutes before the cardboard fell, I could hear a consistent tapping. The cardboard slowly dropped to the floor, and there she was. I smiled instantly. In the blackness of its feathers, you could see the reflection of moonlight. It looked bigger than a normal crow, but not quite as big as a raven. I watched as the bird picked out its own feathers and tossed them into the apartment. I ran back to the window as fast as I could. I looked around and didn't see any birds at all. I left my apartment and took an Uber back to the hospital. I walked all night. I called for hope and looked to the skies for guidance, but I had no feelings or intuition of any kind, no hot fingers or anything. It was almost dawn. I stood for a moment just to watch the sunrise. I heard a caw come from above and watched as a rather large crow landed in front of me. It looked up at me sideways and took off. I followed behind it as fast as I could. It would stop and let me catch up here and there. When I got to Central Park, I could see a huge group of people, all with their phones out. They were all standing in a huge circle watching something. I wasn't tall enough to see over their heads. They were also eerily quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Everyone had masks on, but they were not social distancing at all. They were all holding up their phones as high as they could. I slowly pushed my way through the crowd. I got to the edge of the circle. There was a round sea of crows standing together, motionless. Hundreds and hundreds of crows, all in a circle, and in the very center stood my Hope. She saw me and she bolted for me. The crows in her path were the first to fly away. The others flew away just after. The murder had surrounded her and protected her till I could get there. Immediate gasps could be heard from the crowd as the murder became a tornado and then disappeared into the sky. After we lived on each other for a few minutes, I took out my phone and snapped a picture of us together. I typed, "Got back my ride or die," and sent it to Benoit and Raven. My phone rang instantly. The theme for Get Smart went off. It was Benoit. "You have her!" Benoit screamed into my phone. "Yes," I yelled back. "You won't believe it when I tell you. Meet me at my place. I'm on my way right now." Benoit was standing out front when we pulled up. Hope ran to her and gave kisses. The happiness and the peace that was given back to me, it made me realize what's really important in my world. There will always be a boogeyman to hunt. This world is filled with assholes, but I will never again leave my dog for any reason. We were all starving and trying to figure out what we should order for delivery when we walked into a huge fucking mess. Blood everywhere and Enochian symbols all over the walls and the ceiling of my apartment. Like I said before, when you ask a demon a question, you will get an answer. Fuck me. All the symbols were the same. The entire apartment was covered with the Enochian symbols for the words, "with me." "Dear God, what was your question, Tracy?" I asked him where Hope was. I guess Hope was with him. "Well, no matter where she was or who she was with, the important thing is that she's where she belongs now, my love." "I'm not sure about that. What did you see, Hope? What happened out there? She looked up at me with her soft blue-green eyes and licked my face. The day had been completely wasted by cleaning. I wish I could just hire someone to clean up all this blood, but God knows I can't do that. By the time midnight rolled around, the place was clean except for the walls and ceiling. I would need to paint again soon. Benoit went off to take a shower, and I sat down and told Travis about my day. I had my usual glass of scotch and a blunt while I told him everything. Hope gave one of her boofs, and I could hear a soft tapping on the cardboard covering my still broken window. I ran to it and pulled down the cardboard. My crow was back. It flew in through the window and landed on my kitchen counter. I approached with caution at first, but it didn't seem nervous at all. I walked up and the crow climbed up to my shoulder and relaxed itself. I turned around and Benoit was standing there watching. I reached up and gently touched the bird. It put its face into my hands, and a vision began for me. I saw Arioch's summoning circle and the young woman who summoned him all those years ago. This crow was no it. This crow was a she, and she was Nanny. I reached for my phone and dialed Raven and Crow on Messenger so they could see what was happening. I told Benoit, Raven, and Crow about how I had found Hope. The crow kept walking up to the phone and looking sideways into it. When I was done, we all just sat there in silence, staring at one another. "I have an idea. I'll be back in 20, Benoit said as she ran out of the apartment. When I touch her, I see the vision I saw when I touched Nanny. Am I crazy, or? I asked Crow and Raven.
Are you seriously asking two witches if you think you might be crazy because you're beginning to realize that our mother's soul might be in that oddly large crow that led you to Hope? Are you honestly doing that, Tracy? We would think you were crazy if you didn't. We might be the wrong ones to ask. I'm a little hurt that she didn't come home to her family,"
Crow responded. I need her help right now. I need her help with me and with something especially important. Only she can help me, Crow.
"I know you need her,"
Raven began.
"I also know there are a ton of things y'all are not telling us about. My guess is you're always gonna need her, just like you will always need your sage."
We talked for another 30 minutes or so before we hung up. I heard Benoit coming in the front door. She walked in with alphabet cereal under one arm and a Scrabble board in the other. By that time, I was so tired I was seeing double. I had been awake for well over 24 hours. "I have to sleep," I said to Benoit. "Do you ever sleep?" I asked her.
"Yes, not a lot, but I do. You look exhausted. Go get some sleep with your girl. I'm sure she's exhausted too."
I have no memory of getting into bed or of going to sleep. I had really pushed myself to every limit this week. In my memory, I had been talking to Benoit, and the next thing I knew, I woke up all alone in my bed. I sat up and I felt a change in the atmosphere. I was fully dressed and in my hunting clothes. I put my hand up and everything flowed together, as if I could see the empty space around me. I was moving with my environment, and it was moving with me. I was a part of everything. My apartment and all my belongings were jet black. As I moved, so did the world around me. I got out of bed and walked into my living room. I could see Benoit sitting and talking to a young woman in my kitchen. The two women in my kitchen had color, but it was blurred. It was like they were sitting in the middle of an amber aura. They had Scrabble tiles all over the kitchen counter. I couldn't hear what they were saying. As I got closer, I could see that the young woman was Nanny. She looked so young and healthy, so cute with her little ponytail and white dress. She looked up at me and smiled. In slow motion, she raised her right finger to her lips. Shh. She made the motion with her mouth. Nanny waved at me before turning her attention back to Benoit. I turned around and my living room looked like a dark cave. Bubbling liquid pooled where my polished concrete floors had been. I could see the heat coming off of it. In the center was a man covered in some sort of taping. He looked like a black mummy. He was lying on a slab. I could hear the distant caw of the crows. The wall in front of me began to swirl. The speed of the swirl dramatically sped up, and it opened to a portal. The black crows I had seen in his world before began flying out of it. The birds landed on the man and began pecking. They pecked a hole so he could breathe first. I saw him take a huge breath in. They continued their pecking until there were gaping holes all over his body. The quiet was unbelievable. One of the birds flew to me with a piece of him in its mouth. I watched its beautiful black wings coming at me. I held out my arm to give it a place to land. The bird landed gently despite its enormous talons. It laid the piece of flesh in my hand and then flew back to the man on the slab. My mouth went dry. My upper lip quivered, and a flavor filled my mouth. I began to drool. I put the flesh into my mouth, and the world completely fell away. The feeling was nothing I have ever felt before. Every nerve in my body felt awake. The same flavor Benoit's murder cookies came with. It felt like sex and God. It felt like heaven. I now felt myself hovering over the black mummy. Our noses almost touching. I felt his fear. It was as if I could breathe it in, and it was pure rapture. The birds had removed his eyes. My body began to lift away from him. As I hovered away, I could see the birds gutting him. As his stomach split open, I could see his body cavity was filled with golden keys. I watched as the birds ate away at the last bits of him, leaving only a pile of tape and golden keys. The slab then lowered itself back into the black water. The crows went back through the portal. For a moment, there was nothing, just weightless rapture for what could have been minutes or months. The slab appeared from the bubbling black ooze once again, and the black mummy was back. This would be his hell. This is where he belongs. It was created just for him. My job, I can see that now, my job is to get him home. I heard a soft rattling sound which woke me from my dream. I could hear and feel my sweet Hope snoring next to me. The room was dark, but I could hear the soft voice of Benoit talking, followed by a crow caw here and there. I could hear Benoit chuckling. I woke up to see what they were doing. I felt so awake and refreshed. I've never been a morning person. I felt more awake right now than I ever had in my life. What are you guys doing in here? I asked. Benoit jumped at the sound of my voice. What are you doing out of bed? I thought you might sleep till tomorrow, Benoit said. I feel fantastic. I'm ready to catch a killer. I don't understand. What? What don't you understand? Tracy, you went to bed 5 minutes ago. I told Benoit and the crow about my dream, and as I spoke, I began to fill in the gaps. The whole dream and everything that was happening was becoming clear. I left a few things out. I know that the person I felt in my vision with Dr. Ernie and the cowboy, I knew they were the same person. Dr. Ernie must know him, and if I tell Benoit, she will go after him. I want him. I need him. More importantly than any of that, Arioch wants him, and he wants him bad. I can now understand that want. If Arioch felt the same things I did at the taste of him, then Arioch is nothing more than a junkie, a demon junkie. That feeling is something I want desperately to feel again. It's a high I have never heard of or experienced before. It's also rejuvenating and healing. I felt stronger than I ever had in my life. I felt powerful, and more than anything, I felt like I had changed somehow. I told Benoit about the dream, but left out the key part and the flavor part. I told her about the high, but left out the flavor of her murder cookies. I was closing in, and I have a path now. As I was telling her everything, the crow would caw out loud each time I left something out. Tracy, though we've only been at this for a few minutes, I can tell you this. Number one, this crow wants you to stop referring to her as the bird. She has a name. She wants us to call her Nanny. Also, she prefers working with the Scrabble ties over the alphabets. She just eats the alphabets. As Benoit said this, I could see Nanny beginning to spell something out. We stopped talking and watched Nanny. She was placing the tiles. She spelled out the word burn. Me and Benoit looked at each other. My burn? I asked. I looked at my finger that I had burned on the keys in Joy's apartment. It looked different than the others. It was becoming a collection of tiny symbols. I got out a magnifying glass, and we took one symbol at a time. We counted out 12 different symbols and translated it to English. We used the tiles from the Scrabble game to do this. We were now looking at the tiles intently. Benoit moved them around. We got something that made sense somehow. Benoit moved the tiles back and forth several times before finally spelling out real monster. Nanny began jumping and squawking. Well, no shit. I got a major burn for that? I know that, I said in frustration. We sat up for the rest of the night with Nanny. We called Crow and Raven so she could talk to them also. Benoit would be leaving in the morning to go to work. She was going to hunt him. She was after my prey. I had to find a way to beat her to it. Benoit finally went to bed. I was too full of energy for that, so I began painting with some of the white paint I had left over from the last time I asked Arioch a question. I painted till she got up for work. I made her breakfast and sent her on her way. Nanny sat and watched me all night. I told Nanny everything while I painted. I could tell she was taking it all in. When I was done, I took out my hunting phone and read through the messages left by Candy and Dr. Ernie, both begging me for more time with them. Candy seemed so frustrated, I almost felt sorry for her. I definitely felt badly for the doctor. We had this great night and then I ghosted him. I would need to repair this quickly. I knew he held the answers. He knew him. How do I bring it up? I called him and he answered on the first ring. Hi! His hi was filled with both excitement, happiness, and relief. I'm sorry for not getting back to you sooner. I've been working. I said to the doctor, I'm just so happy to hear your voice. It's been pretty crazy for me, too. I'm a victim's advocate for the hospital in the area. I have a really sad one right now. Been spending quite a lot of time trying to help her get through this. Also, my brother's girlfriend broke up with him and he's been a handful. I'm trying to be there for him, but it's tough, you know? You're there for so many, I responded. You really are such a kind soul, Doctor. I'd really like to see you again. Netflix and chill, maybe? Really? Yes. My God, yes. I can come to your place. No. I can't do that here, but I can go to your place. Oh, well, thing is, my brother lives with me and he's going through such a hard time right now. I think seeing us together might make things, worse. Let me see what I can do. Let's tentatively plan something for night after tomorrow. My brother mentioned having something to do that night. Let me make sure we'll have some privacy and I'll get back to you. His brother, I thought. Maybe this is about his brother, I thought as we were talking. You've mentioned problems with your brother a few times. What's wrong with him? I asked. Oh, Jesus, where do I even begin? Does he work? I asked. Yeah. He can take care of himself, but he isn't like you and me. He's what millennials would call a man-child. He's schizophrenic. He has a little locksmith business. He's always been fascinated by keys. His whole life. He has thousands of them. He can keep it together enough to run his little business, but I thank God every day for the money Mom and Dad left us. His business has never drawn much of a profit. He'll never be without a roof over his head, though. That's the important thing. He sees and talks to things that aren't there. What are you supposed to do with that? He's had weeks of paranoia lately, convinced there's someone in the corner of his room watching him. I mean, it's pretty bad, Tracy. Then he met this chick, and he seemed to calm down a lot. She seemed so good for him. She broke up with him over text, and he just can't let it go. All she said was, "Fuck off." So cruel to do that to someone like him. And there it was. All the pieces falling into place, one by one. I looked through my messages again, and the last one had come in from Candy. It came in 2 days ago. I'm sorry, Doctor, but I have to go. Something came up. I'll call you back. I hung up with him and dialed Candy, but there was no answer. I threw on my hunting clothes and grabbed an Uber. Above me, I watched as Nanny flew alongside us. I watched her dip and glide. This must be amazing for a woman who spent most of her life in one room with no legs. Death had absolutely freed her. As we drove, I looked at each one of Candy's texts. Some were long and some shorter as she became more and more desperate to reach me. Texts like, "You're the first person I felt like I could be myself with." And then her begging, "I've shut everyone out for you, and now you won't even text me back?" Hope put her head in my lap. She could feel my worry. I felt a deep need to protect my prey. Ultimately, I wondered to myself, could Henry have changed her? Could she have been spared? I understood her on a predatorial level. It's unique, and I enjoyed it. When I got to her place, the doors were all locked. I couldn't call for help. If I called Benoit, she might begin piecing it together. I pounded on the door. Nothing. Nanny squawked from a tree alongside her house. I climbed up and I could see a woman's body lying motionless on the floor. The body was covered in black duct tape. I could see the wrapping laying all over the ground. It said Gorilla Tape on it. She looked like a black mummy lying there. I couldn't tell if she was breathing or not. I went to the back door. It was locked. I put my hand into my pocket and pulled out the silver key Arioch had given me. I put it into the lock, but it didn't turn. I went to pull it back out, and I heard tiny clicking sounds coming from inside the doorknob. It opened. I ran in, but I didn't change. No Henry. Fuck. Hope had followed me in. Her head was down, and her tail between her legs. I could feel the stains of fear as we walked through the apartment. Blood smeared all over the walls. I could see her handprints in them. She had such small hands. She was so delicate. But she had put up a fight. I followed the trail of blood up to her bedroom. Her entire body was covered in tape. I grabbed a knife from the counter and ran back to her. As gently as I could, I slit a hole open for her mouth. I could feel her body tensing. She was alive. I held her head and heard her say, "Henry, is that you? I'm so scared." I tried to take off the tape around her eyes, but I could tell I was hurting her. I held her head in my lap and rocked her against my body. The vision began. There we were, back at the weddings. The symbols for the periodic tables swirled around me again, and the flavor of cotton candy rushed into my mouth. "Say something, Henry. I want to know if it's you. Is it you?" I knew if I opened my mouth, she would know I wasn't Henry. Candy struggled to breathe a few more times, and with each breath she begged for Henry. I couldn't break away from my trance. I was in her pink when I felt her take her last breath. I held her, and I cried. "Don't take her! There was good in her!" I demanded. In the pink hue came something I had never seen before. I saw two huge hands divide the pink, like hands coming through a movie screen. The hands were the color of alabaster. It was like watching an animated marble statue. It was neither male nor female. It was beautiful. It had huge, bright white wings. It had long white hair that glistened off its own glow. It dwarfed Arioch. What could this be but an angel? In this realm, I can speak the language of the angels. Beautiful as this angel was, I felt small and vulnerable. The color of its eyes was the lightest blue I had ever seen. The light blue swirled like Arioch's. The entire room was now divided by white and pink, pink that was slowly turning to black. The black stopped in the middle. I sat directly in the middle of the dark and the light, like sitting in the middle of yin and yang. Behind me stood my demon, his wings tucked behind himself. Behind me in the blackness, I could see the glowing of his dog's amber eyes behind him. My feeling was the angel needed no backup. The angel looked past me to Arioch. It spoke, It spoke in a voice I cannot describe in English. There is no translation. It is a sound that flows through a human like a cleansing water. Yet it is not foreign. It's as if the voice has awoken a memory of itself from long ago, well before my birth. Do you condone this mercy, brother? It asked Arioch in Enochian. Arioch turned and walked away. I watched as the lights of his dog's eyes danced around him and then faded away into the black. The darkness that covered half my body did not leave with him. I was afraid, but not as afraid as I am when Arioch is near. The size of it would be off-putting to anyone. I could feel it watching me. I was still holding Candy in my arms. Are you giving her mercy? It asked me. Yes, I don't want her to be damned. There's good in her. I've seen it, I said with a shaky, hesitant voice. There is no need to convince me. It is your choice. The voice reverberated through my body. It felt warm and soothing. I began to relax. What are you? I asked it. What are you? It asked back. I don't know. I thought I knew, but now I realize that things are changing. I have no idea what I'm changing into. Finding the answers is part of the journey. You have shown mercy. I reward mercy. The angel said as it reached for me. It touched my hand. It touched the same hand I was cradling Candy's head in. Just a very slight touch on my pinky finger. My entire arm began to tingle. It felt like I was going to go to sleep. I looked down at my hand, and when I looked up, everything was back to normal. The room was a bloody mess. I gently laid her body back down. I could tell her apartment had been beautiful. She had pictures up in her living room. They were all her in different sexy poses and in different places in the world. Rome, Dubai, Bora Bora, and several other exotic-looking places I didn't recognize. The one thing they all had in common was there was never anyone else in the picture. I imagined her standing in all these places with a selfie stick in her hand. I opened the drawer beside her bed. She had a small wooden box there. There was a lock on the wooden box. I fished around for my key again. I pushed it against the much smaller keyhole and watched as it morphed and filled the hole perfectly. It was as if the metal melted into the keyhole. This key will come in handy. The box popped open. There were old pictures of a little girl I recognized as Candy. Her family looked poor but happy. Lots of kids running around and lots of trailers and trash in the background. Inside was also her birth certificate. I glanced at the name, Barbara May Smith. That was her real name, and she was born in West Virginia. I walked into the bathroom, and there it was. His spot is still firmly planted there. I could feel his energy, and it was slightly different with Candy. Here, he was extremely angry. It wasn't a sick sexual fantasy. This man had been incredibly angry with her. He tortured the others for his own sick fun. This time, he punished Candy through torture. My left finger felt warm and I knew to walk to the keys hanging by her front door. I waved my hand over them just to make sure, and it was like putting my hand near a fireplace. I thought of what the angel had said to me, about how the discovery was part of the journey. That in mind, I touched the keys with my thumb, knowing it would burn me, and it did. I took a cold can of some sort of millennial fizzy sugar-free water out of the refrigerator. I needed to call Benoit. She had started to tell me everything she learned about the doctor, and we got distracted by a phone call. I had never let her finish. The cowboy had changed his M.O. with Candy. He had used a different, stronger duct tape on Candy than he had the others. I also had the feeling she would have more internal injuries than the others. She might have been there 48 hours before I got there. Candy was super healthy. It was the only thing that made sense. I needed the information Benoit had gotten from the doctor. I needed an address. I walked out through the back and looked up at all the security cameras around it. Benoit told me to trust her. I must be sure about all this. Why couldn't Arioch kill them after Benoit arrested them? The last one took his own life, and I can see how that might have made it different. I'd have to hope that Ernie will not do that. I've seen what Arioch has in mind for him, and after all he's put me through to find this guy, if, for any reason, he's not the one to take him, there will be hell to pay, literally. Whatever the case, I needed to find this asshole and protect my world from him. I called Benoit from the front of Candy's apartment. She said she was on her way, so I sat on the front stoop with my bird and my dog. I lit a cigarette and thought about Candy. I know she was a killer, but there was more to her than that. She saw older, wealthy men as prey to get what she wanted. She must have sought out Ernie's twin brother for these purposes. She was also my first lover, the first one I had chosen to have sex with. When I was with her, she felt different. She wanted to love Henry. I had a few minutes of fantasy. I thought about living as Henry and trying to change her. I knew this was ridiculous, but I had it anyway. In a very weird predator versus prey way, I had begun to really care for her. Maybe Henry could have changed her. I guess none of that matters anymore. I pardoned her soul. If that means what I think it means, then she is ultimately safe in her death. Her soul will not spend an eternity on its knees. I can only hope that means she's in a better place. Maybe she'll be with Travis. If there is a hell Arioch places them in, maybe there's a place for those that are pardoned too. If what Ernie said was true, then Candy had dated the cowboy. The FBI and local police had done extensive searches on the other victims' phones, and all the contacts had been cleared. This would be an easy trace. All they needed was her cell phone records. Benoit got there in record time, and I told her everything. I even told her about the gigantic angel. Benoit called for backup before going in. I sat there like I had back in Gatlinburg as watched all the cops went in and the body bag come out. This will be coming to an end very soon. Several new vans had driven up while I was sitting there hidden from view by a nice big bush. Benoit finally came out and sat down beside me. "She was so pretty," Benoit said. Yes, she was. I need Ernie's address, Sydica." "Can't you just ask him?" "Oh, wait, why?" "I think his twin is the one who killed Candy. Ernie seems to be protective over him. He doesn't want me there when his twin is home. I'm assuming Ernie must have somewhat aware that his brother is dangerous or something. Tracy? She looked at me confused. Tracy? Dr. Ernie's twin? Well, he died when they were 10 years old. Cause of death unknown. I thought I told you that. I would have remembered that. I was completely shocked by this news. I'm rarely taken by surprise anymore. How could this be? I'm an idiot! I yelled at Benoit. Everything was right in front of me. Arioch tried to tell me, yes, there was purple, but there was also gold streaks. I don't know what the gold means. I was too busy having fun. I should have known better. I should have taken him down that night. If I had done that, Candy would still be here and Joy would never have been tortured. Fuck me! Yeah, and Candy would be prepping to kill again. I think she was a sacrifice, Benoit. It doesn't seem like she has many people in her life. Just the men she preys on. She would have not been missed. That's how he likes them. Ernie said his brother was a schizophrenic. Whatever's wrong with this doctor doesn't matter to me. I need to take him down. Tracy, this guy's also a doctor. A psychiatrist. He was the doctor in charge of trying to help Joy. Think about that. I want to take him down, Zydeco. I want to hand him over to Arioch myself, right then and there. I don't want to leave there without setting down a jar. I need to go and make sure I'm assuming everything correctly. Understand, this will also make me shift back to myself. The moment he knows the jig is up, I will change, and I will do it right in front of him. I have no control over any of this. The change is here to help me catch the prey. Once the prey is caught, that's all over. I just realized something. The letters on my finger scrambled out also stand for Ernest Rommel. That's why Nanny kept squawking. He wrote it on my fucking finger for me. I still missed it. It's no wonder Arioch didn't just kill me for this. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. I need to confirm everything. He said his brother lives there. He told me that he didn't want me there until this dude was gone. I say you go and surprise him. You have no reason to be there. Say you're investigating the cowboy. I don't care what you say. Just get in and keep him distracted. My guess is that he wanted a few more passes at Candy, or he's hunting again already. What is his brother's name? Oh, Benoit thought for a moment. Edward. It was Edward. Okay, you have to make me a promise. You have to promise me that if you arrest him, you will put him on suicide watch immediately. If he kills himself, that might be the end of me. Arioch will not tolerate that from me again. I can promise you that, Tracy. Look at me. I promise. Let's go get him.